Okay, so I will go ahead and begin. For everybody who just joined us, if you'd like, feel free to complete the survey in the bottom left-hand corner. It's just going to give you a little information on your impact persona and make this presentation a little bit more customizable for you. So I'll go ahead and before we start, I want to start with a little bit of transparency. And that's basically who I am, what we do, and how we get paid. So I know that you probably have been inundated with financial advisors trying to sell you things or trying to convince you to utilize their services. But we are a fiduciary and a fee-only planning firm, which means that the only time that we collect fees is from our clients directly. So I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here to try to get you to see my vision, but ultimately I will become quite passionate on certain things like insurance. And you may have suspected that I might be selling that kind of product, but that's not really the case. I do have the ability to refer over to insurance professionals, but we don't sell any of those products. So I want to be ultimately clear what it is that we do. This class is the master class for our financial wellness program. We have both a financial wellness program for individuals and for employers as an employee benefit. And this is ultimately how this class came to be. So it's a product of the good work we're doing elsewhere. And so we were able to give this information for free. And I do hope that it helps you guys, today. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to start this presentation with a thought. And then therefore a question. So when you came here today, did you think to yourself that maybe this presentation might change your life? I'm very positive, or I can be reasonably sure that you probably didn't think that. And the reason that you don't think that is because quite often as humans, we're supposed to be efficient. We're not there to think about every option, every alternative, anything that could possibly happen all at once and all times. Maybe if you were a time lord, but us as humans, we're not thinking about all those possibilities all the time. So just kind of keep in mind that the way that we are approaching this mindfulness, this money mindfulness, and this approach is very much reliant on how you think. And so I'm hoping that the presumptions that you came in with today will be able to deconstruct that a little bit. So I'll go ahead and start on a little bit about me. Why should you be listening to me in the first place? So I could talk about all the things I've done. I have a Bachelor of Arts, I have a Bachelor of Science, I have a Master's in Science. I've got my licensure as a certified financial planner, as an accredited financial counselor, as an enrolled agent. I have 13 years experience providing financial counseling to the military overseas. I have over 20 years under my belt doing taxes. I can go on and all these things that I've done that up to society's standards are all the things that you need to trust a financial professional. What I will say is after all that education, all those training hours, all the experience I have in the field, everything I learned there is not going to be anything I talk about today. Everything that's happening in this presentation is a culmination of what happened when I got all the education, I got all the training, I did all the things you were supposed to do, and I still wasn't getting the results that I wanted. And so after doing all the learning and education, the only common denominator left was me, that human aspect. So whatever was stopping me from reaching my goals or planning appropriately was something that had to do with me. And so I was able to take away all those other variables with all the education and training. And so really all I had left was to look inward. So really, this presentation is not so much about me and what we do in financial wellness. A lot of this is about you. Who are you really? If you took the time to take that impact assessment that we had at the beginning of the presentation, you had some sort of result as to how you want to impact the world, what your impact persona is. And so the question I really have to you is this a reality that you are having, right? Is this what you would like to see from yourself, or is this what you're actually doing? When we reach the end of our lives, at a certain point, our life is going to flash before our eyes, kind of like a movie. In my case, I'm kind of hoping that it ends up being a musical. But really what you want to do is you want to make your actions and your intentions actually align and figure out what exactly is stopping you from doing that. So what would you actually want your legacy to be? Is it your impact persona? Is it some sort of action that you maybe currently donate for charitable purposes, or something that you'd like to see? But if what you're doing now is not something that may end up in your obituary, is it something you still want to give time and your emotional effort towards? Are your actions actually aligning with your intentions? And the thing is, sometimes we're in a spot where we can't change that, right? Sometimes you don't have control over everything in your life. But the thing is, if we don't take the time to reflect on that and realize whether or not it is lining up, we're never going to be able to do anything better. So I think in my experience, the best way to approach this would be to talk about mindfulness, right? And so first we have to ask ourselves, what is mindfulness? And so you can kind of read the prompt, knowing what is happening, and while it is happening, not necessarily judging it or having a preference. And so with finances, this can be a little bit tricky because we're kind of trained to compare ourselves to others. But understanding how we spend and not being upset or not having those emotional ties, or at least taking a 6,000-foot view, is the first step in making any changes or finding a different path from what we're currently going towards. And so for money mindfulness, most people will assume that this means a budget. And I respect budgets. Budgets have their place. But to me, a budget is a wish list, right? It's a plan of where, if everything were perfect, this is exactly how I would like to spend. But I would say that 90% of budgets don't actually happen that way. At best, they're great guidelines. They can be great directionally, but ultimately the way we spend and our budgets are going to be different things. So spending mindfully, in my opinion, is much, much more important than having a budget. One might inform the other, and of course, you don't want to live in a vacuum, but ultimately knowing how you spend and keeping track of that is going to be much more productive. And you'll have to forgive me, my notes are a little bit below me, so I know this does look a little bit odd. So when you're doing your mindful, excuse me, I'm going to stop there for a second. I start to stutter when I get dehydrated. So how do we go about changing that, right? So we can look at our spending and look at the list of receipts, and that's great and all, but how do we actually analyze and look at these behaviors? What is the spending actually doing for us? And so it can be a combination of literally looking at your everyday spending, looking at your opportunity costs, or even just examining the money scripts that you have. So money scripts are kind of an interesting thing because most people don't understand that they have them. But they're little sayings and little bits of advice we've picked up from our childhood up to now that inform the way that we spend. So these kinds of money scripts can sound like statements such as, rich people are greedy. My problems will go away once I make a little bit more money, right? These are things that we're telling ourselves that will influence the way that we're spending now. And a background can be the same for two different people, but also they can react differently. So, for instance, a person who grows up in poverty, right? When they have a cash windfall, it's very likely, or they may react in a way where they save all that money, right? They've experienced some trauma, and they want to save it because the one thing that they want is to never experience that trauma again, and so they save it. A person who experiences poverty in the same way might react differently. They might not be able to have control over saving or spending, and they might want to spend it right now while it's still there. For instance, so in my family, we had one of my family members was, adjacent family member was a kleptomaniac. And I knew that if I didn't spend it right away, that she would take it. So for me, spending was just kind of it was almost a response to, that's the only way that I was going to get it. So having poverty in your background or having these experiences doesn't necessarily lead to having one kind of attitude or another. It happens to how you react to these experiences that you have. And so ultimately, a person who spends a lot or saves a lot has something that they've experienced that makes them behave in that way, whatever that money script happens to be. And so if we ever want to change these things that we're doing, we have to figure out why we're doing them in the first place, like I had said before. And so by simply logging your spending and seeing whether or not it's related to things like your mood, to convenience, to, maybe we were stuck inside for so long, just to sprucing up your environment, or maybe an unexpected expense, a cultural expectation, right? There's always reasons we're doing this spending, but we want to be able to realize why we're doing it and have the actual decision on whether or not we want to continue to make these kinds of choices. So what is actually sabotaging you, right? Once we're able to examine these things, we have to figure out, is it something that we are going to change or not? Are we going to change our expectations, or are we going to change our behavior, right? Because what we're doing right now may or may not be lining up. And so how does this actually all align with financial wellness, right? We can be mindful, we can understand why we're spending, but ultimately financial wellness is slightly different than mindfulness and that kind of everyday spending. Scrooge was very wealthy, but had no financial wellness. So what is financial wellness really? And there's a lot of opinions on this. You can go to Forbes or anything in the financial industry, and you'll get very particular answers. But here's the thing. All these answers have been made for family units, where there's one person assigned female at birth, one person assigned male at birth, and exactly 2.33 children. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not a reflection of my family, and it's not a reflection of everyone's family. And so all financial wellness programs at this point, whether it's corporate financial wellness, whether it's individual financial wellness, they're stuck on this one size fits all model, right? And the reality is that's just not gonna align for everyone. Not everyone has the same money scripts. Not everyone responds to poverty in the same way, right? So having a adjustable, internal, and self-reflective financial wellness program is the only way that all of us are going to be financially well in our own way. So again, what does that mean? Well, even if we take the classic model and deconstruct that, generally it can be said that financial wellness has certain components: safety, security, control over one's actions or freedom of one's actions, and there's a fourth one, and I'll get back to it, I'm sure. But these are the very basic things. It comes down to security. It comes down to stability, right? We want to be able to do the things we want when we want. And so I'll just stop right there because I know I've spoken quite straight. So if there's any questions, I'll give anyone a moment to ask before we go into financial wellness. I don't think I see anything. Oh. And yes, if you want to start the Doctor Who references, I might also reference Heinlein later. I will get my science fiction references in here, I'm sure. As someone, my Bachelor of Arts is in science fiction, so as an aside. But financial wellness, right? So again, these are the kinds of the elements that go into general financial wellness, no matter your background, no matter your stage in life. Why did it change? There we go. So mindfulness and financial wellness, how is that related? Well, when you talk a lot about finances, you're going to have to end up in dollars and cents, right? We all use fiat currency, and eventually all things kind of tie back to that. Even though technically fiat currency is not technical, well, it exists. I wouldn't say it's real. Dollars and cents, or like the dollar bill, could be a beautiful cotton blend toilet paper at some point, but really it stands for something else, right? And in financial wellness, the dollars and cents can't really make you well, just like Scrooge, right? And so the things that kind of overlap between the dollars and cents and the financial wellness is the time of your, or the cost of your time and the cost of your opportunity. And so there's two ways that I help people calculate this number. So the first one is the cost of your time. Now, this varies wildly from person to person, right? But the best way that I think kind of levels the field for everybody is to think about your favorite chore, or excuse me, your least favorite chore, the chore that you absolutely hate. And think about how much you would pay for someone to do that chore for you. Because ultimately, like, you hate that chore, you want to outsource that chore. If you put that into a dollar per hour number, you have a good sense of how much you value your time and what you would pay to outsource and buy your time back from whatever it is that you're expected to do. The thing that can be tricky is we feel that sometimes being, the act of convenience or the fact that we are capable of doing something ourselves makes it so that we should feel shame if we do outsource that. And you have every right to feel that way, but here's the thing is ultimately outsourcing is buying your time back. So really understanding what you value your time as, and I mean, yes, we can say it's priceless, but ultimately you are going to make that trade on a daily basis. But figuring out what that is can help inform the other decisions in your life. Because sometimes it could just be like, you know what, I'll just pay that person X amount because that hour of my time being stressed is just not worth it. I want my time back. And when you think about time as your currency and not money, then that becomes an easier thing to work around. The other thing you'd want to understand is your opportunity cost. So the cost of spending versus saving generally is the money mindfulness opportunity cost. So you'll find that in the chat, I put that worksheet in, and on the third page of that worksheet, there is an entire page that talks about opportunity cost. And generally what that worksheet does is it estimates what you could turn $1 into if you had that many years and you had certain risk tolerances. So ultimately, when you have a high risk tolerance, you generally get a higher reward. With a lower risk tolerance, a lower reward. And that's what those calculations assume. So for someone like me, I have 27 years before I'll need my money for retirement. So I have a very high risk tolerance and 27 years to invest my money. So anything I spend today, my $1, I can turn to $13.11 based on that page in your worksheet book. So when I make a decision to make a purchase, like I want to buy a snack, and let's say the snack costs $1, I can choose, hey, do I want to buy this dollar snack, or do I want to have $13.11 in my retirement account? Now, here's the thing is, this is mindfulness. There's not supposed to be guilt or shame or anything built in that. It's a decision. And you get to make that decision every single day with every little decision you make. Do I want this or do I want that? The problem that we tend to have is we don't compare. We don't think of our future self. And so therefore, our present self usually gets to be selfish and gets to have all the fun without the consideration of what the opportunity cost really is. And so here's the thing, for me, that decision is not always clear, because sometimes a snack is going to keep me out of jail, right? Sometimes the things we buy have value in and of themselves outside of what we're actually buying. When I lived in Japan, and you can kind of see, like, I'm standing tall, but I'm 200 pounds and 6'1". So when I was in Japan, I literally did not fit in. I couldn't buy the clothes. I was definitely an outsider, and sushi was the way that I felt culturally included. So I spent hundreds of dollars a month eating sushi when I lived in Japan, and based on the standard one man, one woman, 2.33 kids, I'm supposed to feel guilty about that. But here's the thing is, I had great experience, wonderful memories. It was the only way I really felt that I was being included in the culture. So yes, what I was spending on sushi every month was equal to a car payment. But it's something I would do again, because I know exactly how much I could have put in my retirement account, or I could have put to a different goal. And I decided, no, I don't want that other goal. I want this one. And timing and choosing when to spend your money by knowing your opportunity cost is going to be the best use of your money and your time. So understanding these opportunity costs, knowing your numbers, is the first step in trying to make these very little micro decisions add up in a great big way. So how do I know when I'm financially well? I've spent decades trying to answer this question. And it does, it varies and it kind of evolves. And because there is no one right answer between different communities and different cultures and different countries, right? It's not the easiest thing to answer. But I have found in all my travels, all the countries I've lived in, all the things I've done, generally it can be reduced to 4 numbers. I'll talk about the 5th number sometimes. The 5th number is not something I created. I don't want to take credit. There's a 5th number you can use to calculate financial wellness, and I'll be happy to tell you about it if you ever catch me on the side. But these are the 4 numbers that I have come up with that I definitely can talk about. And it comes down to, do I have capacity for the bad? And do I have opportunity for the good? All these numbers generally come down to those 2 things. Do I have capacity for the bad? Do I have opportunity for the good? And so for the capacity for the bad is your grief number and your emergency number. Right. So, and for the can I have opportunity, or excuse me, yeah, can I have opportunity for the good? That's your freedom number and your respite number, or your retirement number, if you want to call it that. And what do these mean? So these each have a different slide. So I'm going to go through them individually, just so that we don't overwhelm you just on one slide. So your emergency number. This is all your cash and cash equivalents, everything you have access to liquid-wise. If something big were to happen, this would be how long you could survive to weather that emergency. The other way you could describe it is this is how you could weather your adversity. So if it is birth, death, marriage, divorce, those things, how long would you survive if just the table got flipped, right? And that's an important number to know. And a lot of people do understand the emergency fund, right? That's the very basic start. You don't want to have to ruin your financial plan just because an emergency arose. So this is measured in time, and you'll see that all 4 of these numbers are measured in time, because time is a more important currency than dollars and cents, in my opinion, anyway. So the second number, your grief number. So this is where I'm going to get a little heated about insurance, even though I don't sell it. So your grief number is how long you will allow your family to grieve for you. I know a lot of people say, when I'm gone and dead, I don't want anyone to grieve for me. I want them to move on with their life. And, that's the sentiment you're allowed to have. But here's the thing. If you don't allow the capacity for the people to grieve for you if they want to, are you recognizing that, right? Because here's the thing is, if you have no insurance, you have no way of dealing with being incapacitated or deaf, they will have to go back and work, and they won't have time to grieve for you. They'll have to weep softly and keep a stiff upper lip on the outside. If you get injured, that'll be how long they have to go back to work. And hopefully the nurses who are overworked and underpaid are gonna be there for you in your coma, right? You really do need to have something for not just regular emergencies, but the big ones, for the times where you're not gonna come back from disability, or you're not gonna come back from death. Because ultimately, one of the worst things you could do to your family is make it so that they do not even have the opportunity to grieve for you. And I know it's easy to just kind of not think about, and it's kind of a painful thing to bring up, but understand that when you don't think about it and you ignore this particular part of your financial planning, you're setting yourself up for literally, flipping the table, making your entire financial plan come completely apart, and unraveling all the things you've done and all the work that you've done to this point to try to get your family financially to where you want it to be. Okay, and so that's going to be the harshest this presentation will be. But so the good things, the opportunity, right? We want to have the freedom and opportunity to express ourselves. So the first one, or the first opportunity savings, is your respite number, or you can call it your retirement number. The reason I don't like calling it your retirement number is I'm not the kind of person who's ever going to retire. At best, I will probably still work, but I'll be working on projects I choose. And if I want to dedicate 100% of my time to self-care, I can do that. I can work or not, or rest or not. I get to choose, right? But I don't have to. There's no longer that societal obligation for me to work if I want to see my life the way I want to see it, right? And then last, your financial freedom number. So a lot of times we work and we save because we're just not sure what the future holds, right? And ultimately, you can save all the way up to the end of your life. And I guess if you want, you could die with, all this money and give it to someone else. But in my opinion, I really don't want to die with a whole lot of money. I kind of want to spend it throughout. Like I want to use it. It's why I earned it. And so, finding your financial freedom number, or at least the amount that you need to live to the rest of your life, can be really great. So just knowing all of your assets put together. So if I sold everything, even the real estate, I mean, it's hypothetical, but like if I sold everything today and just lived off of it, how many years could I live off of that? Right? And if how many years you could live off of everything you own, when that number becomes larger than the rest of your life expectancy, you have financial freedom. But we don't calculate that number very often because we're too afraid of what ifs, what ifs, what ifs. And again, I wouldn't say like once you reach your financial freedom number, definitely rely on that number. But it could be a great guideline to knowing, hey, maybe I only have to work 2 more years. I'm not going to work until I absolutely can't anymore, just in case. Right? It gives you the freedom to be like, okay, I can scale back, or maybe I can take a year in a sabbatical, or maybe I can do, maybe I can take a year working abroad, right? Or work in a nonprofit, something I've always wanted to do, but now I can take a pay cut, right? And so financial freedom and understanding when you're finally going to make it can be important as well. And ultimately, I think that if a human being never gets their financial freedom number, that's a situation where they may never have reached true financial wellness, right? So these 4 calculations, and on your worksheet, you can see, like you can put these numbers in, it'll calculate it for you. But these are the 4 numbers that you should use to calculate financial wellness. And ultimately, again, we're going to ask ourselves, how do I know when I'm financially well? And I still can't tell you the answer. Because ultimately, whether or not you're financially well will come down to how you feel about the numbers you calculated, right? If you are a person who needs that security and needs to know that they could deal with adversity for over a year, then you want that number to be a year or more. If you want, to give your family X amount of time to be able to grieve and not have to worry about, feeding the kids or paying the mortgage or that sort of thing, if you're happy with that number, then you're financially well. And if you have all those numbers and you feel good about those, especially the financial freedom number, then I think you've got it. I mean, you can get to the details, all the little things you invest in and all the finance, math equations, alphas. You can get into all of that nerdy stuff. But ultimately, none of those things are going to tell you you're financially well. These numbers will. And how you feel about these numbers will. So ultimately, I still can't tell you whether or not you're financially well, but these are the kinds of things you should be doing to deconstruct and think about, am I doing what I want to? Are my actions aligning with my intentions? If they're not, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to change my behavior? Or am I going to change my expectations? Because I should do either one. I suppose I could live in denial. That's an option as well. But ultimately, there's no way I can get better at my own financial wellness if I don't address the issue. Okay, so we'll go ahead and stop there. And I'm very happy to answer any more questions. I know I did a lot of the talking. I'm hoping to start getting this more interactive, but virtually it can be difficult. But what I do ask is, I have put some time making this presentation, and I'm very happy to give free education. What I would like from you is, if you could, give me your feedback. Did you like this presentation? Was this new to you? And for that, I'd be very happy to provide you with a free gift. We have several choices in the survey, but ultimately, whether or not you want the workbook that goes with this class so that you can log your financial scripts and the reasons that you're spending, whether it's a social responsible investment analysis that actually correlates with the persona impact assessment that you just took, or if you just want a free consultation, you'd like to talk more about this, and you'd like to just get more ideas of how you can become financially well. All of those are things that I'd be happy to freely give you for doing our 2-minute survey. And other than that, we also, I invite you to link with me on LinkedIn. We give these tidbits out every day as like little posts on LinkedIn. So I invite you to connect with me there, and I'll also be happy to talk to you if you have any questions or concerns. So I thank you for coming. Your time is not free, so I'm always happy that when I promote time as a currency, that you're willing to share that currency with me. So again, I'll stay here on the line, and for anyone who wants to ask questions, we'll stop the recording. So if you want to ask a question that's not recorded, we're going to stop it right now.